All right, and we're recording. So, welcome to the Cyber Kill Chain presentation series. This is the last segment of the Cyber Kill Chain, the last phase of the Cyber Kill Chain, actions on objectives. So, just again, as we start these phases, we kind of go over the, as we do each segment, we do a refresher on the Cyber Kill Chain. And with this presentation specifically, we're going to be talking a little bit about alternatives to the cyber kill chain at the end of our presentation today. And I mean, in this phase, we talk about a lot of different things because the actions on objectives is really everything that the hacker intended to set out to do when they started the hack. So just a quick recap, the kill chain it simulates the attack lifecycle by going through, or by breaking it down into 7 phases: reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, and actions on objectives. This kill chain was designed by Lockheed Martin. I just picked it because it's a good overview, and most of the alternative kill chains out there follow something similar, but this one's pretty boiled down. And it's easy to apply to the different kinds of attacks that are out there. So essentially, the attacker will select their target. They'll perform reconnaissance on the target. So they'll discover what kind of services are there, what kind of technologies are running on that target. Then from there, they'll filter down their findings from the reconnaissance phase and start designing attack vectors based on what they've found on those findings. From there, in the weaponization phase, they'll likely start developing custom payloads if that's necessary. So they'll even start deploying exploit payloads if they've found potentially vulnerable services. Then in the next phase, delivery, they'll actually deliver those payloads, or they'll also deliver phishing campaigns depending on what attack vector they've decided to go with. Most of the time, you'll see a lot of phishing campaigns. And when it comes to cybersecurity careers like pen testing, you're going to be doing phishing campaigns all the time. Another component of the delivery phase might be delivering specialized packets to probe attack paths before you exploit them. And then in the exploitation phase, that's where, honestly, it's one of the funner parts of the cyber kill chain when it comes to, legally doing a hack as, someone who's certified and contractually, you're secured with a contract to do that type of stuff. So in the case of that phase, the exploitation phase, you're delivering a payload that exploits the vulnerability on the system, whether it be like some kind of a buffer overflow or an overwrite or something like that. Or let's say it's, your log4shell vulnerability. You're sending a crafted payload so that it exploits the vulnerable service. And in the case of phishing, the exploit phase can be seen when the victim clicks on the wrong link or they hit enter once they've typed in their credentials into a false portal. That's the exploit when it comes to the social engineering part of, the context. And then from there, as you can see in this graphic, all those previous phases are external to the victim network, and then the red phases are within the victim network. So I put yellow as well because sometimes your exploiting is happening, it's fuzzy where exactly that's happening. And so that next phase, installation, you've gained some kind of a temporary, usually a volatile kind of access, so it's unreliable, it's not persistent to that victim network or machine. And from there, the main goal on installation is to establish a foothold that's persistent and reliable and allows you the versatility that you need to perform the actions on objectives. So, and as I went through this whole series, I described how the kill chain, once you start looking down at the way it applies to specific attacks, it gets kind of fuzzy and some of the phases start to blur together. But from a bird's eye view, the installation and command and control phases they can be considered separate in a way, but again, they do blur together in a lot of different aspects. But in the installation, you're installing the agent, the malware agent, or the implant, as they call it in different parts of cybersecurity, that's designed to reach out and call back to a command and control server. Now, the command and control in and of itself is a pretty diverse topic. Typically, what you'll see is someone has set up, the attacker has set up a command and control server that's remote, to which the implant or command and control agent on the victim machine is going to call back to. And typically, it's going to establish some kind of a covert command and control channel on the victim network, usually through one of the protocols that's typically used on the system that won't be closed, that won't be locked down, that won't be suspicious. So the idea of that is to hide traffic within commonly used protocols like HTTPS or SSH or some kind of a Microsoft protocol if it's a Windows machine. Something that your computer's not going to flag and be like, hey, there's traffic on this port, and there's not usually. So that type of thing. So there's a lot of things to consider. If you want to learn more about all those different phases, definitely go check out the other videos. They're on our YouTube channel, and I'll drop the link in the Discord for those who are curious about that. But if you're on the YouTube channel and you're watching this there, then just go check them out. And so that last phase, actions on objectives, that's what everything is, all that previous work has been leading up to, and that's what we're talking about today. So, actions on objectives. What's the objective of this phase? Action on objectives. So there's many. There's so many. It's really it's whatever the attacker has set out to do, honestly. And I know that's not a very useful thing to say, but we can basically break down most of the objectives of this phase into categories, and these are just some categories I just spun up out of my head. Thank you, Keith, for dropping that link. These categories, they're not like strictly what the categories of an attack of the actions of attack can be broken down into, but this is just like a simple list. So some categories would be data exfiltration, and that just means copying or stealing or retrieving data from a system, whether it be just emailing it out or downloading through SFTP or there's so many ways of actually exfiltrating that data. But the idea is they're looking for databases of sensitive information. Sometimes credentials are stored in databases. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes you have to, you're stealing password hashes. That's what's being exfiltrated. Sometimes it's logs to learn more about the different services that are running on that machine or whatever's going on that machine, or even the network logs, that kind of stuff. And sometimes you're trying to steal browser sessions, like browser cookies, session cookies, all that kind of stuff. That's one thing. If you ever get into threat intelligence, there's a huge market in buying stolen browser sessions. So it's the session, including the cookie, all the login stuff. So there's plugins you can download on your web browser, and you would just upload these browser sessions into the plugin on your browser, and it just logs you right into the previous session. And so the big trick is that if the service that the user was using doesn't have an expiry date, or doesn't have a long or a short expiry on the browser cookies and stuff like that, or the session tokens, then if someone steals your browser session and sells it online, someone can just log in as you with all the right information, and the browser or the website doesn't think any different. So anyways, another category of objective for this phase would be spying. So they compromise the system, but they're not there to exfiltrate. They're not there to perform any other further attacks. They just want to spy. So that's another thing, and that's an entire subject in and of itself. Federal surveillance and that kind of stuff. That's a pretty political one, but anyways, performing attacks like man in the middle, pivoting from that computer to more computers. That can also involve like using that machine, the compromised machine, as another place to mount attacks from. Ransomware, so you're encrypting the data found on that machine for a price, mining crypto on that machine, so you're deploying persistent programs that will continue to run and utilize the system's hardware to mine cryptocurrencies for yourself. And then digital vandalism, destroying data, destroying websites, defacing websites, being a nuisance, right? That kind of stuff. So those are some of the action categories, and it's really not limited to that. There's so many more. That's just all I could come up with off the top of my head. I feel like it covers majority, but we'll see. So again, just kind of the idea of this phase is that it's the culmination of everything that the kill chain's been working towards. All the phases are culminating in this final phase. And so, what is it taking to get there? I mean, if you've been following the kill chain series that we've delivered, there's a lot of work involved in getting to this point. And depending on how complex the system is, it can be months, even a couple years maybe of preparation, depending on how crazy it gets. There is actual statistics on what the average lifespan of an attack typically is, and this kind of an attack following the kill chain is usually deployed by an advanced persistent threat, and they're somewhere between, usually it's around 6 months long, where 5 months of that was recon, and then that last month is exploiting and performing actions on objectives within the system. So, the hacker has to ask himself, is it worth all that time and that effort? Well, that all boils down to the hacker's objectives, their goals, their motivations, really. Why are they doing it? What are they getting out of it, right? Back in the day, back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, hacking was a lot simpler, and a lot of people just did hacking for the lulz, man. They just did it for fun. But that's not really the case quite as much anymore. Things are more complex. Not impossible. It's still very, very easy to hack some things, but people are doing it more because there's a lot more reasons to be doing it. So we'll get into that next. So this website, it's in the source there, and I'll drop the PDF in the chat afterwards. But this our blog article I pulled up breaks it down into these categories of some of the motives that can be behind a hack. I would say the number one is financial. You don't really see hacking happen very often without a financial motivation. And by that, I mean like a clear financial, like they're doing ransomware on the system to literally get paid then and there. Exfiltrating browser session credentials to sell online for money, right? Stealing credit cards for money, that kind of stuff. So, so that's the black hat way, the black hat financial motivation. But then there's white hat financial motivations like collecting bug bounties. You hack to collect those bug bounties. There's websites that give everyone the all clear to try and find bugs in their system. And so that's a happier way to look at the financial motivation behind hacking. I would say that the next big motivation would be state-sponsored hackers, because when you rule out all the ransomware guys out there, all the data exfiltration people, those types of hackers that are financially motivated, the next big one is state-sponsored, and those two I would say make up the great majority of what kind of hacking you see in the wild. But state-sponsored, you'd see like Russian hacking teams, American hacking teams, Chinese, North Korean. Israel has a really strong hacking team. So those are the types of state-sponsored hacking, and that's also where you'll see a lot of surveillance, and those are probably your strongest advanced persistent threats out there, are the state-sponsored hackers. They're the ones that have, in terms of cybersecurity terminology, unlimited resources, unlimited time, and unlimited manpower. So they can, I don't know. It's wild. That's a whole nother subject. We could do an entire series talking about advanced persistent threats and the different ones that are out there. FireEye does a really good job at. Was it FireEye? There's another one. Yeah, doesn't matter. But there's a lot of big companies out there that do a lot of research on the different kinds of advanced persistent threats that are seen out there, based on the systems that they have their eyes on, their hands in. So that's another interesting one. And then hacktivism. So, you know, you get some talented computer people out there that feel politically motivated, so they do some hacking to raise a voice on a certain political issue. And then some people hack for the challenge. I haven't heard a ton about those. Those are very few and far in between. Unless you're hacking on more of like a, hack the box type thing. People hack on that for the challenge all the time, and that's a totally legal way to hack. Research. So you'll see a lot of cybersecurity firms with cybersecurity researchers doing research on different hacks. Then some people hack for revenge. Some people hack for the infamy. They do it for the clout. And I don't really know what the subversion is, but I guess it would be like subverting local authorities or like rebellion, but kind of bleeds into the other categories a little. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you guys to this service called Prelude. The company's Prelude, the program that uses these chains that you're about to see, is the program's called Operator, and it's free. You can just download it off their website and start playing with it. But it's a command and control framework. And again, disclaimer, remember that if you're downloading anything free, usually you're the product. And as well, this is malware, right? It's defanged malware, essentially, but it's still malware. Don't use it for anything stupid, and do a lot of reading before you screw around with this kind of stuff. So the reason why we're going to talk about the chains is because this command and control framework is designed for the actions on objectives phase of the attack. So in pen testing, you'll use a program like this, or you'll use, there's so many. On the last phase, last week's video, I gave an entire list of like 40 different command and control frameworks that you can download and play around with. And some of them are paid, like Cobalt Strike, that have advanced agents that allow you to do tons of crazy stuff. But this one has weekly chains that come out to simulate actual attacks seen in the wild. So as you can see here, this one emulates, I don't know how to pronounce that, Quackbot. It's privilege escalation, it's defense evasion. So it'll create a scheduled task, because this is the behavior of that malware. This is what it does when it gets installed on a machine. It'll create a scheduled task, add a path folder to the Windows anti-malware exclusion path, and then creates a staging folder to emulate the other observed behaviors of Quackbot. And so it breaks it down into what they all are and stuff. And so that's an example of a malware attack. And there's some other crazy ones in here. So this whole malware chain section, it's designed to simulate what all these ones in the wild, like WannaCry. I don't know if you've heard of WannaCry, but that one was crazy. So what this chain will do is simulate the lateral movement using the Eternal Blue and Double Pulsar exploits. It'll stage a shellcode payload. It'll exploit a vulnerable SMB1 service, install persistence, then kills the running database processes, and finally deletes the volume shadow copies. So these are examples of the types of actions on objectives you would see in a real attack. And in the case of WannaCry, this is exactly how that ransomware that would worm and jump from machine to machine to machine. That was a huge problem a couple of years back. And I think it resulted in more than $4 billion in damages and infected 200,000 plus machines across 150 countries. And it took out hospitals in the UK. Like, it was bad. It was one of the worst ransomwares that we had ever seen at the time. But there's been some pretty crazy things since then too. So that's the whole idea, right? Like, this is one of the ways that it gets so specific with the actions on objectives. Maybe there's another interesting one, but I won't leave this up to just me. Like at the end of this, once I stop the video, we can talk about whatever attack we want to talk about that's been seen out there. Conti, that's a ransomware group. And there's multiple kill chains in here that or attack actions on objective chains in here that show you the way that those work. So Jambi is it's a type of malware that pops up, or that gets downloaded directly into the memory. So it has no physical presence on the machine at all. You just run a PowerShell script, or not script even, just a command on the PowerShell, and it loads Jambi right up into the memory. And so, I don't know, maybe that's worth looking at as well. Yeah, so what it would do next is discover local services, identify potential security products which may interfere with a successful attack. So this is, once it gets in, it's going to do a little bit more recon within the system to prepare for another attack. And then it checks if the machine is vulnerable to Print Nightmare. I know a few of us in the club have done reports on Print Nightmare. That was a really big one, really interesting attack as well. Yeah, so it identifies the currently joined domain. So it's a Windows system. It's going to check the Windows domain and then bypass controls by sideloading the rsat80 PowerShell module from a remote GitHub repo. So it's doing all kinds of calls. It's calling out to different websites. It's calling to Git repos. It collects a ton of data on domain information, groups, associated users, identifies backup servers, finds domain computers that are hosting shared printers. So it's a lot of recon in this attack. So it's funny that, we broke down the kill chain into those 7 phases, but even within that last phase, you're repeating the kill chain. And that's why at the end of this presentation today, we're going to talk about the variations of the kill chain and more modern frameworks that represent attacks in a way more thorough manner. So I think that's good for now, just talking about this. This is in the slides if you want to check this out, and if you want to download Prelude, it's there. So yeah, you just click this, or I can't remember. Maybe it's that. Yeah. Anyways, check it out. It's cool. So another thing I wanted to mention is that some hacks don't really fit into the cyber kill chain, like at all. They fit into 1 or 2 phases, but they're really their own thing. So that's another way that the cyber kill chain doesn't really fit to some of the hacks that are out there. One example of that would be infected software, like that you'll find with like cracked video games or cracked software that you download off torrenting websites. It'll say it's cracked. You install a thing. It tells you in order for the software to work, you need to turn off your antivirus or set it as an exclusion. Sometimes you're not going to get a crazy, Trojan on your computer, but usually it's only free because they're installing either a crypto miner on your computer to run while the software is running or run while the game is running, or they're installing a persistent agent on your machine to use your machine as in a much larger botnet. I actually remember hearing about a hacker who, that's the primary way how he built his botnets, was by deploying, or he would crack video games and software, and then he would compromise those games and software with the ransomware agents, or not ransomware, the botnet agent, so that he could use all those people's computers who downloaded his torrent. So yeah, beware. If you're doing that, you might have already been compromised. So that's something to think about. Torrented movies and music, as surprising as it might be, you can still be compromised by watching a movie that you downloaded off the internet or listening to a song that you downloaded off the internet. There's many ways that you could be compromised through that. So you're always taking a risk when you do that kind of stuff. Also, I didn't mention this, but streaming. So if you find those like free movie streaming websites, it's free for a reason. My colleague was showing me how when you're streaming, the browser will utilize your system hardware to run crypto miners in the background, and so that's one example of how those streaming websites can use your resources. It's a form of a hack, right? It's not quite as complex as the other hacks, but if you cracked games, that's pretty wild. That's pretty cool. So video game hacks that's out there. This is one of my favorite subjects, actually. It's super interesting, and it's a much less like, authorities don't really care about people hacking video games. It's mostly video game companies that care about people hacking video games. And even then, they don't do a whole lot about it half the time. But as you can see in this picture, it's someone's running an ESP software on the video. I think that's on CS:GO, so that they can see whoever is playing wherever they are on the map. And they probably have aimbot on there too, so that when the person comes around the corner, their cursor just locks on the head and they just shoot. And there's all kinds of stuff that you can set up with that, like auto shooters too and stuff. But those ones are super interesting. That's a form of a hack that, like, you would be a script kiddie if you downloaded that and used it, because you're not writing any of that yourself. But some of the people that go through it, they're reverse engineering the video game. They grab the data offsets for where the player locations are. Then they write software to automate the modification of those offsets. Depending on like if they're health values or if that is a value that can be modified. 'Cause some values are server side, some values are client side. But and then from there they implement detection evasion techniques, and sometimes they get pretty crazy with that, like writing kernel level evasion techniques for their video game hacking software, which is a straight up like advanced malware TTP, and that's something we'll talk about in a moment, the TTPs. And then they sell the programs online as a service. So it's a straight up like video game hacks as a service, man. It's a thing out there, and it's a small market, but people make a living off it, which is crazy. And then also I would say web application hacking arguably doesn't really follow the cyber kill chain. It kind of does, but it skips phases. You don't really get like a system compromise phase in web application hacking. It's more about hacking the web app itself, but you do follow recon, you follow weaponization, you follow exploitation, and then even then you get your actions on objectives where you might be exfiltrating data or you might be defacing the website, that kind of stuff. But it's uncommon to find a web app exploit where you're actually gaining a root shell on the machine hosting the web app. That's not very common, but sometimes it happens. Okay, and then the alternatives. So the kill chain, it's not perfect, right? There's already been people who have suggested alternatives like the unified kill chain. I think I have that actually, yeah, right there. But the kill chain itself is a military concept, but then Lockheed Martin adapted it to information security. This is a really good graphic for breaking it down as well. But then people, they had their critiques. They're like, oh, well, it doesn't really fit every attack and that kind of stuff. So FireEye came up with their own alternative. And Mandiant is a sister company of FireEye, so you'll see the same graphic with Mandiant. But this is what it looks like. You got your recon, your initial compromise. But, so they change it by saying initial recon, initial compromise, establish the foothold. Then there's a loop within there where you're escalating privileges, internal recon, move laterally, maintain presence, and keep going until your mission's complete. You've got your objectives are done, right? So this is a slightly different kind of attack that maps out a different attack with a different objective, basically. Mandiant has the same thing. They just changed the graphic and added a bunch more. These are frameworks and tools that are used in these different phases. So if you're interested in checking them all out, like if you want a career in cybersecurity, you'll want to know every single one of these tools, because the more you know, the bigger your arsenal is, the more you'll be able to be versatile when the time comes to try and run these types of things. The MITRE attack is what I would consider the modern superior place to go to check for all the cybersecurity lingo and the categorized tactics, techniques, and procedures of hacking. So that's what this stands for. The TTP stands for tactics, techniques, and procedures. You don't see the P in here, but you'll see that referenced all the time if you're new to this, and if you're starting to look at like CVEs and stuff like that. Common vulnerability. Oh crap! What was it? And exploits. I think that's what CVE stands for. Anyways, the CVE records for different exploitable vulnerabilities out there. You'll see mention of TTPs throughout there, so it's good to get familiarized with the MITRE attack framework. And so as you can see here, they have entire categories for reconnaissance, resource development, that'd be your weaponization phase, initial access, execution, persistence, privilege escalation, defense evasion. Look at that, 42 techniques. This is huge, defense evasion. And these ones with the little blurb there, they break down into subcategories. That's how intense they get. So it's got even more. This is definitely worth a look. There's no way to take this all in at once. This is something you'll be looking at for years, honestly. And then you'll want to check out this type of thing where it breaks down all the different kinds of attacks or tactics that happen, like in an enterprise environment, reconnaissance, the techniques. And so, gather victim network information, domain properties. You read about this stuff, right? And it familiarizes yourself with how these frameworks classify different actions. And enterprise, mobile, ICS, they're different things. I can't tell you what ICS stands for. I can't remember.
Industrial control systems.
That sounds right. Did you look that up or?
No, I didn't.
Oh.
That was just a guess.
Okay, that sounds right to me. But see, as you can see, I'm not totally familiar with this. What all the acronyms stand for. There's a billion acronyms out there to memorize. So, yeah, MITRE attack. It's probably one of the best ones. It has a graphic as well, but I'm gonna let you find that yourself. And then the Department of Defense came out with a more complex approach to it, called the Diamond model. Here's their official release document for it. It's essentially their approach to intrusion analysis. So it breaks down the attack, and they get like this is pretty much a scientific paper. They get mathematical in here. I'll show you. So here's the Diamond. And then this is where they start putting together different terms for the formulas of the attack, like what composes the vertices, all that kind of stuff. This is, in my mind, a little bit, like personally, this is my personal opinion. I don't really care to dive into this level of stuff because they start getting into actual math. But, if you want to start calculating legitimate metrics that follow a scientific pattern for how these guys have approached intrusion analysis, then this is definitely one of the best sources to check out. And they got some nice graphics in there. I'm not going to break down what all this means because personally I didn't study it. So if you guys want to check it out, you totally can. If there's someone else who knows more about this, feel free to jump in at the end and explain it. But yeah, so it also talks about the different phases, pretty similar to the kill chain: recon, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, and actions on objectives. So that's probably, I think this came out, when did this come out? Oh. That's exactly what Lockheed Martin's is. And so I think this came out before Lockheed Martin. So I don't know, maybe that's some plagiarism there. Who knows? So anyways, there it is. It's not a new concept. I think the diamond model was 2013. And I don't know. Is that just trivia at this point? We'll move on. So last thing, little disclaimer. You know, we've mentioned a lot of tools that are out there, a lot of hacking tools, a lot of command and control frameworks, all that kind of stuff. Remember that you're taking a big risk when you're downloading someone else's malware from the internet. You didn't write it. You don't know what the sublines, you know, the hidden code is doing. If there's like a code base of 20,000 lines of code, like, are you really going to go through all that code and check it? So and especially if it's compiled binary, like unless you reverse engineer it, you might not know what kind of callbacks it's making. Like, what if you're installing an agent and it's actually making callbacks not just to your computer but to another botnet, you know? So who knows? Who knows what's actually happening? Why is it free, right? Because if someone can deploy that big of a framework for free and it's that complex, there's probably a reason for it. They're gonna make money from it at the end of the day. So anyways, you know, crank that paranoia, man. Be careful. Trust no one. Trust nothing. Assume the risks you're taking. There it is. So that concludes today's segment. Thank you for showing up, and we'll talk a little bit about hacking. We'll open up the floor to everyone now.